My name is Patricia Restrepo, and I am one of the curators of the exhibition Slowness, which is a two-part interdisciplinary exhibition orbiting around the legacy of DJ Screw. This exhibition focuses on the DJ's process of chopping and screwing and provides a lens of suggested viewing of contemporary visual artwork in relation to that process. Ayanna Jolivet Mccloud is one of the 15 visual artists in the exhibition who produces work through strategies that parallel DJ Screw's methods. Slowness aims to destabilize the dichotomy of original creation and derivative appropriation. DJ Screw reimagined music by a vast array of artists, as illustrated by the 30 records in his personal collection presented in the archival component of the exhibition. Likewise, many artists participating in Slowness have appropriated or visually sampled extant material. Ayanna produces photo-adjacent work without the use of a traditional camera, instead appropriating photographic imagery. Consider her 6 prints in this exhibition, which combine appropriated photographic reproductions of Black rioters layered over backgrounds of the ocean and earth. To address erasure, Ayanna looks to the archives to create new futures or revised interpretations of history. Please help me welcome Ayanna.
It's great to see everybody. Good to see familiar faces and new faces. So I just wanted to first of all, thanks to Patricia for inviting me. And also, it's really important to me to acknowledge the labor behind the scenes. So I also thank Yet, my good friend, and then also Felice and just the education team for organizing the talks as well. And I also, just being a native Houstonian, and I'm happy to see the juxtapositions that are out there, so thinking about archiving, and all the great work that Julie Grobe has done to create the archive at U of H, and also the great photos of Ben DeSoto. And so it's really great to kind of have, as an artist, to kind of have work in conversation with that. I really like that in terms of kind of thinking about exhibition frameworks. It's very liberating. So I want to also thank, or just kind of acknowledge Hodge, who's a good friend of mine and whose work I admire, and just excited to be introduced to Tay's work, whose work I saw at the Gregory School as well. And so I just feel like it's good company to be in. I kind of wanted to, I'm going to start with the body of work that's actually in the show. So the work is around capturing Black people who are rioting at different times in history and different places around the world, and it's juxtaposed alongside images of the Atlantic Ocean and also nature, images of the land, particularly photos of the land in cemeteries and African American cemeteries. So this is an image that kind of gives you a little bit more of a backdrop of the riot that I know very well. So I graduated from Jones High School, class of 1996, and Jones is in South Park, and it gets its name from being south of McGregor Park. So I don't know if everyone knows that, just a little bit of history. And South Park is basically the neighborhood that Screw also grew up. So Sterling is in South Park, and it's basically a place that if you grew up, you know, in high school in the 90s, you hear Screw everywhere. And so I remember it just kind of being the backdrop for me in high school as a teenager, but also kind of just seeing it when I would go outside in the front of the school on St. Lo, folks kind of just, you know, in their cars selling Screw tapes. And just friends having the Screw tapes, you know, in the cassette deck as well. And the 90s were also a very interesting time because I remember in 1992 is when the Rodney King verdict happened. And I was actually outside of my art teacher's classroom. And Tracy Ware, put your hand up, please. So Tracy Ware is my art teacher, and she's also a fabulous artist. And she was also she always checked all of us, and you know, when we were posted up and taking our time in between classes. But I remember, I remember being outside of art class, and we found out about the verdict about the Rodney King riots, and it was such a incredibly powerful, tense moment racially. And I just remember as a black person, all of us, we just screamed and yelled and just, we were happy. And it was beyond the verdict. It was just about this kind of intense moment of politics and racial injustice. And so this is an image that many of us who kind of, were teenagers, young adults in the 90s, we know this image. And so it's a very potent, powerful image for me. So I use this as a kind of point of departure. This is an image of Rodney King being kicked and physically assaulted by police. So the body of work that I have in the show is basically images of me kind of thinking about the protests that have happened, juxtaposing those images alongside some images of the Atlantic Ocean. And so there are images of, this is Watts, an image from Watts, alongside an image of the Atlantic Ocean. This is Baltimore, more recently. I also included images of photos that I took of African-American cemeteries. And so just very kind of macro images, very close-up images of the land of a cemetery and putting these images against that backdrop. And this one is London. And this is also London. So another body of work that I want to share is a show that I had at the Gregory School. And this was from last year. And so this is the Botany and Ancestor series. So this is kind of some snippets of that. It looks like beautiful, kind of luscious landscape photos. It's basically me going into historic African-American sites that are pretty much neglected and being transformed because of gentrification, because of so many different things, and me taking pictures of the plants and the flowers. And so the process is cyanotypes and also paint and some digital editing too. So I want to kind of just show some of my other work too, that it kind of speaks to kind of the language of Screw, just because of the pacing. So this is work that was displayed at the Art League Houston. A connecting thread in all of my work is space, land, and place. My work is minimal, probably an overused word in the history of contemporary art, but it also kind of centers on restraint. I feel like that's the best way to explain my work. It's looking to Screw music. It's kind of similar in that it's slow and it's stretched out. So this is from 2018, and it's a really sparse installation, including dirt, bells, and text, and it also featured some local artists, women artists, and they had some scores, and they also did some performances in the site. So the connection to land is very present in my work. A lot of my work is rooted in diaspora and a searching and even a kind of emptiness. And I feel like that's also kind of present in Screw's work, just this space for searching and kind of figuring things out. These are some older site-specific installations in Miami and Chicago. And my kind of work with photo, I feel like is really not, like the photo is not just the end result, it's really a way to kind of search and discover and figure things out. And so this is actually a photo that I did in Miami and Little Haiti. There was a lot of gentrification that was happening, and there's just a great history of Haitian diaspora in this particular neighborhood. And so a friend of mine, me and Patrick DeCastro, who is actually Haitian, we did some site-specific installations and in homage to Haitian art and mysticism. These are kind of inspired by Vevez in Haiti. So these are some symbols that pay homage to Erzuli, Dambala, and also the crossroads, which is really common in the African diaspora. We hear it referenced in a lot of African-American blues, folk music, but also less overtly, I feel like it's referenced in hip-hop and just thinking about immortality. In relation to this exhibition, I believe this work is an example of what it means to remix or even appropriate a symbol or a language and make it your own. This reflects the aesthetics of remix and an homage to process. So me kind of paying attention, just thinking about diaspora and kind of taking ownership of this language and being in conversation with someone else from African diaspora and thinking about how we can kind of insert our own bodies in this space. So this is just work that I'm continuing to kind of just map land and space in different sites. And so this is a grid, and numbers are really important to me. I just kind of look towards kind of African diasporic mysticism, where it's all a lot more coded. And so this is a grid that's 7 by 7. And then there's 3 eggs in the center of it. And so kind of looking at land art and just kind of mapping that space. And this is just an installation. Again, this kind of continuation of like looking at land and dirt. And these piles on the ground are actually, there's holes in them. And when you look down, you see a mirror. And you can see the reflection of yourself. And this is actually graveyard dirt, which is very popular in kind of African diasporic ritual. And just kind of continuing with the, continuing with the mark making. And I'd want to, kind of the last image I want to show before I kind of play a sound clip is just an image of lovers. I feel like there's a lot of kind of tenderness and love in Screw's music that people don't know how to frame. And so this is an image where I did a photo of my palm and a photo of a previous partner, and it's called Palm and Psalm. Paying attention to kind of the history of the Psalms and that coded kind of history in the African diaspora. So I want to play a sound clip, and yet if you can actually help me pull it up. And while she's pulling it up, basically it's a sound clip of a collage of the sound of riots. Thank you. The collage of the sound of all the different Black riots that were featured in the photos that are in the exhibition. And this sound clip actually inspired the photographic work that's included in the exhibition. So I'll play a portion of this since we are kind of limited on time.
Baltimore City police are now throwing bricks at the kids.
For the city of Los Angeles, a third day of tension and violence. As night approaches, police and National Guard units are out in force. Federal troops are on standby. Violence in the city appeared to die down a bit today, but the toll is obvious. 37 people dead, more than 1,300 injured, more than 4,000 arrested. Damage estimate, $200 million and rising. 4,000 National Guard troops have joined the contingent of police and California Highway Patrol officers.
gentleman, 20-year-old, here with me now, who doesn't want to be identified, but that's cool. Why do you think there are riots going on?
Because peaceful protesting isn't working. By doing a riot like this, it brings attention to the case, because they've been doing this for years now, and black people have just had enough, or people in general have just had enough.
Who's been doing what for years?
The police murdering our brothers and sisters in custody. Just the other day, Smiley Culture was died. There's too many lives. How many more of us? Too many lives. How many more of us?
We'll get our justice. They've won the battle, but they haven't won the war. We'll have our day in court, and that's all we want. And I love, you know, I'm neutral. I love people of color. You know, I'm not like they picking me out to be. We've got to quit. We've got to quit. You know, after all, I mean, I can understand the first upset for the first 2 hours after the verdict. We can get along here. We all can get along.
So just in the kind of respective time. So that was Rodney King, and I wanted to end on that. And I also just want to acknowledge my own connection with Screw and say my favorite Screw track is The Dead in the Year, Street Military, 1992, when the Rodney King riots happened, and it's the most beautiful, self-reflective kind of song, thinking about our connection, our mortality as kind of black people. And also, it's just really surreal, and it really speaks to me. I want to go ahead and transition and let Hodge speak. This song is actually on a part of an album that he created, and I feel like this is actually a great transition. So thank you for having me.